I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. It's still a nail-biter in the race for the White House, and with such little time left in the campaign, what can the candidates do to deliver an effective message? Welcome to Perino on Politics, where I call my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. And joining me today is a very smart friend, Marc Thiessen. Marc formerly served as chief speechwriter to President George W. Bush, as well as Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld. And he's a Fox News contributor, a columnist at the Washington Post, and he and his colleague have an amazing podcast called What the Hell is Going On? And the intro to that podcast is still my very favorite. It doesn't get old. You have to listen to it. And I recommend that anywhere you go. I do want to mention, of course, we are recording this on Monday, September 30th, and there are so many Americans who are dealing with a tragedy after the storm of Hurricane Helene that Governor Kemp described as a 238-mile wide tornado. So we are aware of that, and Fox News is covering that very closely. But there's also a campaign and a vice presidential debate coming up, so that's why I wanted to talk to Marc. Marc, welcome to the podcast.
Good to be with you, Dana.
Thank you.
So honored to be on your pod.
So we just had on America's Newsroom Senator John Thune, and he's a Republican from South Dakota, in case people don't know. And in the commercial break, I don't think I'm saying anything he wouldn't have said on air. You know, we asked him, is it as tied as it looks? And he says, oh, yeah, it's margin of error territory. Like, we are tied. And when you look at the recent trends and polls with there being so much noise, just looking ahead to the vice presidential debate, which will take place on October 1st here in New York City, is this a debate that might matter? I mean, sometimes vice presidential debates don't matter, but could this one help or hurt either of them?
Well, our friend Karl Rove always reminds us that people don't vote for the vice president; they vote for the president. So this is a debate between the two top surrogates for the campaigns, and so therefore it matters. Will it change the trajectory of the debate of the campaign? I'm not sure, but it could help in shaping people's definitions, especially since nobody really knows Kamala Harris or what she stands for, and so there's an effort going on both sides to define her, and this could be millions of people are going to be tuning in to watch how they define her, and also just one of the big problems that the Trump-Vance campaign has is with swing voters. There are a lot of swing voters who will say to you that my life was better under Donald Trump, my life is worse under Biden and Harris, but I just don't like him. I don't feel comfortable with his temperament. I don't feel comfortable with the way he behaves. I don't like the things he says. And so the first rule for Vance in this debate is don't offend anybody. Childless cat ladies, none of that. There's he's very good at clever punches and hard-hitting punches. And this might not be the place for that. If you can get out of here with having landed some blows on Kamala Harris without having offended swing voters, then that's what I'd define as success.
Apparently, according to CNN, Tim Walz is very nervous. And I don't know whether that was just his team putting that out there to try to fake people out, or maybe it's accurate. And I think one of the reasons is that we've seen, like, we are day 71 and Kamala Harris has yet to do a press conference, which is just basic Democratic leadership. And she might do one about the hurricane later today, we're told. But Tim Walz, who used to come on America's Newsroom regularly, in fact, he came on the day after the Trump-Biden debate to defend Joe Biden. And yet the Kamala Harris campaign has really kept him hidden from any interviews as well. Why is that?
Because the more exposure you have to what they stand for, the less popular they are. They want to look. She is the least tested, least vetted major party nominee in the history of our country, probably, certainly in the modern era. Because think about this: normally, what you do to get to this point, where you're less than 6 weeks away from an election, is you have to go through a primary process in your party. You have to debate 20 other people in your party who are tearing you down from the left or from saying you're unelectable, and you have to come up with a policy platform and then learn how to defend it on the debate stage. You have to go through town halls with voters in New Hampshire and Iowa, where people are not pre-screened groups of voters where they're asking questions and asking you tough questions, and you hone your message and you hone your capabilities, and then you go through the long process of vetting vice presidential candidates, and then you get into multiple debates with your Republican opponent. Mm-hmm. None of that has happened. The only thing we have to go on for her platform is what she campaigned on in 2019. Which is which if you go by that, she's the most radical left-wing presidential nominee in the history of our country. Mm-hmm. And she's walking away from some of that, not in her own words, not explaining why she changed her positions when she's changed her position. And she just wants to get through this, hope she can get under the wire on vibes and joy. And at some point, I wonder how many Americans are just going to, it's a binary choice. You have to go into the voting booth and pick between the two names on the ballot, or you can write somebody in or not vote, I guess. But I wonder at some point, Americans are patient. They understand that she was thrust into this because of Biden's collapse. But at what point does their patience run out and say, I can't vote for her if I don't understand what she stands for? So I think in the long run, maybe she hurts herself, or maybe she gets away with it. I just don't know which it'll be.
When you are preparing somebody to give a great speech and you're writing a speech like you've done for so many people and so well, a speech is different in that you can write a line that you think will probably be the line that if your boss delivers it well, will be the line that is picked up and used as a soundbite and becomes a defining moment of a speech. Yeah. In a debate, can you write something like that you're going to deploy, or does it have to be something in the moment that makes a difference in a debate?
Oh, 100% you prepare. First of all, the reason why you prepare a speech is out of respect for your audience, right? You want to think through what you're going to say and have the respect for your audience, not to meander and wander around and have thought through your policies and how to defend them, right? In a debate, Ronald Reagan's famous line, he didn't just come up with that on the fly.
Tell everybody that line in case they don't remember.
Is like, I will not, for political purposes, use my opponent's youth and inexperience as an issue in this campaign. It was one of the greatest lines in debate history. Of course he had prepared that.
And actually, the late Bob Beckel told me that in the Mondale line of Where's the Beef, which was a takeoff on a Wendy's, the hamburger place ad, that they had practiced that. And he said that it took him so long to get Mondale to understand the cadence and where to put the emphasis of the sentence, because it was like, where's the beef? And where's the beef? Where's the beef? And it took a while, but he was able to deliver it, and then they turned it into an ad.
Yeah, so it's a discipline of developing a message and a soundbite. And quite frankly, what Kamala Harris did a really good job of that in her first debate. That entire debate was scripted. She had, one thing, she is not good on her feet. She can't answer Trump one-on-one. What they did is she did her homework. She spent weeks preparing, coming up with lines, coming up with speeches, memorizing them. And she deployed a bunch of series of speeches. And the reason you can tell is because in the few interviews she's done, she just says the same thing over and over again. I grew up in a middle-class family. Everybody was proud of their lawn, blah, blah, blah. No matter what you ask her, you just push it, you push a button and out comes, soundbite number one, out comes soundbite number two. And sometimes it doesn't work. But while that's kind of humorous and you have to be able to think on your feet in a debate and it shows, at the same time, you have to prepare. You have to have you can anticipate everything that your opponent's going to bring up practically, and you should have an answer prepared for it so that you can take them out. For example, with Trump, he should have known that she was going to make fun of his rally attendance and people getting tired. And what he should have had prepared was something to the effect of, "Excuse me, somebody just died at one of my rallies. Don't you dare talk about my supporters. Don't you dare question their loyalty to me or to their loyalty to our country. These are people who literally, one of them died and two of them almost died at the hands of an assassin's bullet, and I took a bullet at one of my rallies. So don't you talk about my rally." It would have put her completely on her heels. She wouldn't have known what to do. That was a completely anticipable. That's not a real word.
It's a good word, though.
Easily anticipated
It's like
moment.
Our former boss, George W. Bush, when he came up with misunderestimated.
Misunderestimated,
That should actually be a word. It captures something. So you had a very interesting, unique, amazing, historic experience, and that you were set to have an interview with President Trump. That was in Florida, right?
In Florida, Mar-a-Lago, yep.
And it was the day after, or was it the same day that there was a second assassination? There was a second assassination attempt on his life.
We're both Bush people.
And he didn't cancel.
No.
He said, let's do the interview.
Yep. And actually, I'm the only one he didn't cancel that day.
Mm-hmm.
So I was the first person to talk to him from the media after the assassination. What was fascinating to me, first of all, I spent about 3 hours with him. Not a lot of it off the record.
That's a lot of time for him to give.
It is a lot of time for him to give. We got interrupted briefly because he had the director of the Secret Service had to come in to brief him on the assassination, the attempt. I
actually think we covered that part live on America's Newsroom.
Yeah, so literally, I was in his office interviewing him, and then they say, "Sir, the head of the Secret Service is here to see you." He's like, "I got to take this. Do you want to grab some lunch while we're waiting?" I was like, "No, it's okay. I'll just sit outside." And so I'm literally watching Fox on the screen outside talking about the assassination while looking at the door where the Secret Service director was walking in to brief the president on it. So it was quite a surreal day. But what was fascinating to me about that moment was a few things. One, it wasn't the first thing he wanted to talk about. When we sat down, he didn't jump right into that. The first thing he talked about were the polls quickly, and then he was really upset at the Heritage Foundation, and he wanted to share that with me. He
tell people why, because I know that you and I know why, but one of the things I try to do here is keep it at this 30,000-foot level so that people can feel like they got enough of what they need without having to be obsessed with politics. But Project 2025, what's that?
Yeah, so this is a campaign blueprint that the Heritage Foundation put out, that the Democrats are running millions of dollars in attack ads and using it on every stump speech and all the rest of it, attacking Donald Trump, which is a sort of conservative wish list of policies that are not vetted by Trump. And not only that, they were not only putting a conservative wish list, they started a resume bank and were interviewing people to vet them for the Trump administration. So they were presenting themselves as being a transition team. And the Democrats have used this against him. And why it's been so effective, or why it's been so devastating for him and good for them, is because if you look at the polls right now, Donald Trump owns the political center. There was a New York Times Siena College poll that came out that showed that almost a majority of Americans, I think 49%, said he's neither too far to the left or too far to the right, whereas Kamala Harris, 47% said she's too far to the left. And so and the 53% said she's a risky choice. And so what she wants to do is make him the extremist who's risky. And she's using Project 2025 to do that. And so he described the conversation he had when Kevin Roberts basically called to grovel. And he said, "Who the hell do you think you are? You don't speak for me. How dare you do this?" He's really mad about it. And he said, this is something that can ruin a campaign. So I've never, quite frankly, in my life, I've never seen a think tank do so much damage to a conservative political candidate in my life than the Heritage Foundation.
Do you think part of the reason that people on the left know a lot about Project 2025 is because I'm just fascinated by how people are getting their information now. Yeah. And it's not the traditional ways. There's a gazillion ways that you can get information, but I do think that on non-traditional media, the Democrats must have just been hammering this issue to you. You got to a point where in one of the polls I saw 67% of people said they knew about Project 2025. I was shocked by that. And then something like 62% of people said they were against it. And that included Republicans.
Yeah, because nobody's read Project 2025. No one's gone in through the hundreds of pages of policy proposals, but it's become a placeholder for Trump as a radical, his radical right wing ideas, and
he's aware that it's a problem.
Yeah. He's aware it's a problem and he's mad about it, but he said, he's disavowed it. He thinks people know he's disavowed it, and so he thinks he'll overcome it.
Before we take a break, is there anything from your interview that you could share that would not be divulging any off-the-record conversations, but anything about his mood, his sentiment, his feeling about the election as he heads into the last 5 weeks?
So we did spend a lot of time talking off the record, so I can't share some of that stuff there, particularly about foreign policy, because he's very careful about what he says publicly because he wants to preserve his negotiating position. But in terms of the campaign, one of the questions I asked him, and we can talk about this after the break because I think it's quite crucial to understanding the election. But I said to him, this election is going to get decided like 2020 by a few tens of thousands of votes in a few swing states with swing voters, and how are you going to appeal to them? And he said, maybe it will be, maybe it won't, maybe it'll be a lot. I don't think he thinks it's going to be as close as we were saying, as the polls were showing. I don't know if he's right. I don't know if he senses something that the rest of us don't. That wouldn't be the first time that's happened. But he seems to think he's got a lot of support. I don't know how much of that's bluster and how much of that's reality, but he's confident.
It'd be interesting to ask Kamala Harris the same thing, but she will not talk to us.
She hasn't been on your podcast yet? I can't believe it, Dana.
I'm working on it. All right, we'll be right back with more Perino on Politics. And we're back with Perino on Politics. And Marc, you and I worked together during the Bush administration, second term in particular. We were working closely together. And a lot of what we were trying to do was to continue to keep the country on offense against radical Islamic terrorism.
Yeah.
And I feel like Israel in the last 2 weeks have reminded the Western civilization what it feels like to not just sit back and wait for the next attack. And I wonder if you think that this will have an effect on, maybe not on the election per se, but on the posture of the United States going forward. I know on the podcast you do with Danny, you talk a lot about foreign policy. It's one of the reasons I love your podcast, because it helps me stay informed. And wondering how you're thinking about this moment.
Well, first of all, Bibi Netanyahu right now is getting close to like Churchillian status in terms of his resolve and his determination. He spent a good part of a year letting the Biden administration hold him back because he wanted to work in concert with them. And it looks like he's finally said, to hell with this. We're taking the gloves off. I'm going to beat them.
Yeah, because Biden kept saying to him at every turn after October 7th, take the win.
Yeah.
And then walk away. And instead, Israel said, no, thank you. I will press my advantage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so they can't come out of this without having destroyed Hamas and Hezbollah. That's what victory is. And you keep hearing the Biden administration talk about ending the war. And they never talk about winning the war. Bibi wants to win the war. Israel wants to win the war. And this is the kind of, this is in a sense, Bibi is presenting an alternative, a Trumpian alternative to the Biden-Harris presidency, because Donald Trump, when he came into office, one of the first things he did was the ISIS caliphate had risen under thanks to Joe Biden's management of the withdrawal from Iraq, and they all of a sudden ISIS grew up, built a caliphate the size of Great Britain, and started beheading Americans and committing, and they spread their tentacles around the world. 143 attacks in 50 countries by ISIS stitching from that caliphate. And the Obama administration had held back the American military in terms of its rules of engagement and what they could do. And Trump came in and he said, took the gloves off and said, go get them. And they wiped them out in a matter of months and destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And that's kind of what Bibi's doing right now with Hezbollah, and what he should have probably done from the start with Hamas and may now do. And so this is what if you like what Israel is doing right now versus the fear of escalation that we see from the Biden administration, this is what Trump will bring as president. I had a long discussion with him about foreign policy, and a lot of it I can't reveal because he talked about his conversations with a lot of world leaders. But what became very clear is the Biden administration has a policy of escalation avoidance, right? They're terrified of doing things that will provoke our enemies into escalating. Trump had a philosophy of escalation dominance. What he would do if somebody was messing with us, he would tell them, I'm going to go to the top of the escalation ladder and dare them to come with him. And if you don't, at the same time offering a chance for negotiation. So he draws a red line in the Middle East and says to the Iranians, if you kill a single American, we will not hold your top proxies responsible. We will hold you responsible, and we will make you pay. He killed when they crossed the red line. He killed Qasem Soleimani, and then he told the Iranians, I've picked out 52 targets inside Iran, and if you retaliate, I'm going to take them out, and we're going to hit you in Tehran. And they backed down, because they didn't want to go that high up. It's like they'll inch up the escalation ladder, but if you take them right to the top and say, I'm bombing Tehran, they will walk back because they know they lose that war. And so that's what he does. He does that with China. He does that with Russia. He does that with all these countries. He said, this is why he was the only president in the 21st century on whose watch Putin didn't invade another country. Because he knew that Trump would go to the top of the escalation ladder, and he told him so. And so this is if you want to restore peace and you want to restore deterrence, you have to have a president who's willing to escalate is less afraid of escalation than our enemies are, and makes our enemies afraid of escalation. And that's what we don't have with this administration.
Are you able to speak to how that might play then in Latin and South America, which is the root cause, well, where the root causes are, I think, of a lot of our immigration? Obviously, there are people coming from all over the world trying to get into the United States through our southern border. But I do think that our southern hemisphere has been so ignored, and that has been a huge problem. Now we're all paying for it.
Well, what Trump did in a different way, not militarily, but he told the Mexicans, one of the things that the problem is not just our southern border, it's Mexico's southern border. Right.
Okay.
So all these people from Central America, now it's at the whole world. So it's people coming into Mexico from all over the world. But at the time, it was Central Americans coming up through the border, and they would just cross over Mexico's southern border and make their way to the American southern border. Mm-hmm. And Trump said to them, I'm going to put tariffs on you that are going to shut down trade between our countries if you don't take care of your southern border. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, the Mexicans had tens of thousands of their National Guard troops patrolling their southern border, preventing the people from coming into their country and getting to our southern border. So he used that kind of escalation dominance using economic tools as well as military tools. So I think that you would see that probably restored in the southern border as well. He told me, I'm going to shut down the border on day one. I believe it.
I have just one more question in this section, and that is, I'm really interested and hope to do more on this podcast and have something in the works coming up in the next few weeks. I'm interested in the Jewish American vote.
Yeah. And,
if we are talking about some of these states that are going to be razor closed, even though President Trump doesn't think they will be, but if we're looking at all of the polls, and Real Clear Politics shows the averages that it's tied, could these changes in the realignment of politics make a big difference? We know that Latino voters are becoming just voters, right? They're not necessarily going to vote how their grandparents voted. Black Americans too. But the Jewish American vote, we interviewed somebody last week on Newsroom, and the interview has really stuck with me because he said he's always voted for Democrats and that he plans to vote for Democrats in the future, but that in 2024, he's a single issue voter. And that issue is Israel. Now, a lot of people might say they're a single issue voter. Maybe it's pro-life or pro-choice, or maybe it's just fiscal responsibility or whatever that issue might be. But in this case, I don't know if you had a chance to talk to him about it, and that you could say, do you think, Marc, that Jewish Americans might make a choice, not all of them, but enough of them decide to vote Republican that it could make a difference in some of these states like Pennsylvania?
Well, I think it made, for example, in 2004 with President Bush, it made a difference. I think there were a lot of people who voted for him because they wanted continuity in the war on terror after the 9/11 attacks, and they might not necessarily be regular Republican voters. I think there are times when you have single-issue voters. And I don't know what's going to happen with the Jewish vote, but I think what you're going to see over time is a realignment of the Jewish vote, because I think you've got particularly on college campuses, you've got a generation of young Jewish Americans who have been radicalized by their experiences. They have seen these protesters up close. I've been so proud of a lot of these Jewish students who've just been fearless and just saying, no, you're not going to stop me from going to class. You're not going to like that, and standing up and suing the colleges and all the rest of it. I think that next generation of Jewish voters is going to change as a result of what's been happening. I don't know if it's going to be affected in this election or not, but I think you're going to see a new generation of young Jewish voters who are going to be much more pro-Israel, much more pro-Republican, as to the extent that the Democrats continue tolerating these anti-Semites in their midst.
It's a fascinating thing to look at, and I'll be paying attention to it. Hey, we'll be right back with more Perino on Politics. And we're back with Perino on Politics. Marc, this is where I ask my smart friends, with now about 5 weeks left to go in the election, what do you pay attention to that I should watch in the next few weeks as they try to close out these campaigns?
So for me, a couple of things. I think that I just recounted my conversation with Trump, and he's much more confident in these swing voters than I am. I think he shouldn't take them for granted. I think this is going to be decided by a small number of people who are not so sure about. They know they don't like Harris and Biden. They don't like the direction of the country, but they're not sure about him. He should be spending the next 5 weeks focusing almost exclusively on them, because after 2 assassination attempts, his base is going to come out and vote for him. There's no chance that there's a MAGA voter who won't walk over hot coals to vote for Donald Trump. He needs to win over those swing voters in those swing states. And one of the things that I would like to see him focus on is the Haley voters. A lot of those Haley voters are the swing voters who are going to decide this. And there was a New York Times poll that showed in Georgia, for example, that 1 in 5 Haley voters aren't going to vote for him right now. He needs to win those people over. She got 77,000 votes in the Georgia primary, even after I believe she had left the campaign by then. There are a lot of Haley voters in those states. He should be campaigning with Nikki Haley.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, he doesn't seem to ask her. She has said she's willing to go campaign for him. I know that they kind of buried the hatchet or whatever, sort of, but does he just not think it's going to help, or doesn't want her to?
I didn't ask him, so I didn't get a chance to get it directly from the horse's mouth. But yeah, well, I mean, you can see the fruits of it. She's not on the campaign trail with him. She should be in every one of the swing states with him at rallies and talking. And then the other thing is, I think he needs to. There's a side of Donald Trump that he doesn't show the American people too much, that really would appeal to those swing voters. And I tried to bring it out with him in my interview. I talked to him. Everyone knows that he's a strong opponent of illegal immigration, and I think he correctly assesses that is going to be a key issue in the election. But he's also a strong supporter of legal immigration. Mm-hmm. And I asked him about that because he has a proposal that he almost never talks about on the campaign trail to give a green card to every foreign student who comes here to the United States and graduates either from a community college or a major university. That's a million people a year that are in our colleges. That's a huge. And he makes the case he says, I know some people in the Republican Party don't like it, but we need those people. We need talent. I'm a businessman. I understand that we need to acquire talent. I think if he talked more, when he talks about it, when he tweets about it, even in all caps, when he tweets about it, he's like, we have to bring people into our country, but murderers, terrorists, rapists, blah, blah, blah. I think a little bit more of a pause on the first part. A little bit more of a meditation on why I asked him, for example, in my interview, tell me your family's immigration story. And he told me about his father, who came as a 5-year-old with his grandfather. His grandfather went to Alaska and to join the gold rush, and decided that he would make his money building hotels for the people instead of chasing gold, and died of pneumonia. But his father eventually moved to Queens, and he met his mother, who came from Scotland to work and who loved the Queen. And they had a great marriage. He if you are a MAGA voter, you are pro-legal immigration, because if it wasn't for our openness to immigrants, you wouldn't have Donald Trump. It was our open immigration policies and welcoming policies of immigration that allowed us to have the MAGA movement in the first place. And I asked him, do immigrants make America better? And he said, yes. I want to hear more of that, because it release for somebody who is a swing voter, who's a little uncomfortable with the rhetoric on illegal immigration, but agrees with him. Majorities agree we got to deport all these people who came in illegally. It softens it a little bit to say, but I support legal immigration, and I want to bring more people in who are talented, who love America, who care about this country, who want to make this country better, who share our values. I'd like to hear him talk more about that in the campaign, because that would ease the way for some of these Trump skeptical voters in the swing states to say, I could see that man in the Oval Office.
Well, how fortunate am I and my listeners to have a chance to listen to you today. Marc Thiessen, thank you. And I'll be watching him. Watch him on X. You can get a lot of Marc feedback there. And of course, on his podcast and at the Washington Post, where he's a wonderful columnist for them. Thank you, Marc.
Thank you, Dana.
Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.